because anxiety is so contagious and our kids do want to be so helpful, they can come to our rescue in a way that is not helpful for them, and they can be trying to carry us during times where it's not their burden to carry.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, the lovely Michelle Mitchell. Michelle and I connected a number of years ago when we were both speaking at the Resilient Kids conference, and neither of us can remember exactly what year ago it was because a lot's happened between then and now. So we were lucky enough to meet, and I was lucky enough to actually pop in and hear Michelle speak. And Michelle is a speaker. She is an award-winning speaker and a best-selling author, and hearing her speak was extraordinary. She's so grounded but so witty and humorous and so experienced, and she's often known as the teen expert, but Michelle's expertise extends across children and mental health and wellbeing for lots of reasons. I know that you may remember in episode 10, Erica Rhodes referenced one of Michelle's books, which is her book on self-harm. But Michelle's written a number of other books, including the Everyday Resilience Journal, which is just a worldwide bestseller, and a number of books on puberty and others as well. So I'll encourage you to check out all of her books. The show notes will have a link to her shop and her email. Michelle is also now a lovely friend of mine. She's a mum just like me. She's often heard and seen on the media in Australia. And Michelle, like me, knows anxiety way more than she'd like to. So, Michelle, I know that that's a really big, long introduction. You probably need a little nap after that. But thank you for joining me.
It's always so weird hearing someone else talk about you when you're just sitting there. I don't know what to do with myself sometimes. But Jodi, we're going to have an amazing chat. It's actually nice to spend time with you.
Oh, you too. We've been on the phone, haven't we? On and off over sort of the last few months, really. And it's been, it's been a interesting time for you. Coming out of the woods with having had COVID, and we were both just talking today about how we took a little break today so that we could refresh ourselves, ready for this afternoon. So how are you doing? And you're coming to us from beautiful southeast Queensland, I must add.
It is beautiful at the moment. It's been raining a lot over Christmas, but the sun's shining again and the skies are very blue. And I'm well again. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm doing pretty well. It's almost like admitting you have leprosy, isn't it? Like saying I've had COVID.
Oh, very much so. I know when people were first starting to get it, there certainly weren't. Well, this is back probably nearly 2 years ago. If you had it, it very much felt like that. There was this stigma around it. But to me, I guess where I am in Victoria and Melbourne, it's everywhere. We've managed to dodge it so far. Perhaps by the time this goes to air, that might be different. I hope not. But it seems that it's just so common now that people are just much more comfortable kind of speaking openly and letting others know where they're at and what's happening.
Yeah, it's really hard to hide it when you've got to cancel a week of work, though, isn't it? It's like, and everyone directly asks you, have you got COVID? Because it's like, yeah, so there is no dodging it. And yeah, I'm so glad to sort of be able to move on from that now. So that's good.
Oh, I'm so pleased for you. It is. I remember reading this funny meme that we no longer say stay safe. We say, I hope you get COVID at a convenient time in your calendar. And now that we're all back at work and kids are at school again, it's not convenient.
That's right. That's right. Do you find you always get sick on holidays? I really used to hate that. I'm not as bad these days, but I used to find that as soon as it was holidays, it was like the sniffies would come and I would be like, oh dear, like I've just stopped. Why now? So there's never a convenient time really, is there? Sometimes we're too busy and sometimes we just want time off.
That's it. I did. And I know we were both in another life. We wore the teacher hat in the classroom. And I did. I almost inevitably each holiday break would roll around and I would get something which I ended up looking up and researching and was at the time, this was a long time ago, I looked it up, was termed leisure sickness. And
it's true. It's a real thing, isn't it? And I think especially with school terms, because they're so regular, it's like your body gets on a clock.
Mm. And it's just so stressful. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like now. I do still have some colleagues and friends who are in education, and the expectations are much higher. But yeah, it's just like your body goes, oh, thank goodness I've actually got time. Once the stress kind of ends, and we always hope that if that does happen, we have a few days towards the end of the holidays to actually do something nice. Oh, so you sent me some photos today, which or yesterday actually, which had my jaw dropping, and I know that today you're going to share something with us because I know when we spoke, you withheld this story so we could share it for the first time together with our listeners today. But um, can you talk to me a little bit about the role anxiety has played in your life as a
Mhm.
person, as a mum,
Mhm.
in any facet of your life, and then share with us, the story behind the photos that you sent because,
All right.
yeah, yeah,
Let's
I
go
can't. I'm
then.
speechless. I mean, I don't know quite what to say because I just cannot
Oh,
imagine what this experience was like. So tell us how
it's a big
anxie
one.
yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think for me, because my work at times has been very full on, like I've worked with a lot of kids who have been in big crisis situations, have experienced a lot of trauma. I've sat with young people in the hospital after car accidents and they discover they were never going to be able to walk again. I've sat with kids in a coma with their families in ICU. And I guess because you've had some of those experiences and those memories, there's a part of my heart that has sort of always been anxious that that might happen in my home and to my children. And so our memory bank is a really powerful thing, as you know, Jody, as we go with parenting. And I found that when my kids hit 18, and especially when they got their license, I had far less control than I had in the past. A lot of influence, though, let's say that. A lot of influence, but far less control. And I had to really transition with them. And I would always give them kind of like the sort of slightly anxiety-based lecture as they would leave the house. And it's so beautiful as they get older, they start to handle you. You know, like they start to notice when you are crossing over that line and maybe parenting out of fear. And my boys have been amazing with me, just stepping into that space and almost drawing a boundary with me. Jodie is saying, Mum, I can really hear you. I know you're really anxious about this, but it's going to be okay. So it's amazing how they've picked up on that particularly as they've gotten older, and how they have validated that for me there are certain things that I need a lot of reassurance about. And I think I've always said to them, look, if you give me a bit of reassurance, it's going to really help me just be able to let go a little bit here.
Mm.
But you want to hear my Matthew story?
I do.
I had just got home from a work trip. This was about 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 probably. We lose track of time at the moment. Um, but it was about 11 o'clock at night because I think I'd got in from Perth late, and my husband had gone up to bed, and Maddie wasn't home yet, but knew he was at the cricket and he was on his way home with a mate. So I was kind of staying up to say hi to him and putting on some washing. And then all of a sudden my husband came down from the bedroom, and he came down incredibly serious with this energy about him. And as he put on his shoes, he said to me, Shell, Matt's had an accident. Matt's mate was driving the car, and it was Matt's mate's dad who was working in Sydney. The police had rung him, but obviously he couldn't get to the scene because he was in Sydney and
Mm.
he had rung Doc. And he said, can you go down to they're at the highway. Apparently they've had an accident on the highway. And he said to me, just got this call. I don't know what state it's in at all. I want you to stay here. Let me handle this and I'll ring you as soon as I know. And he literally just exited. So I am pacing the floor of my house, and I almost jumped in my car and followed him, but I literally rang him on the phone and said, just at least let me be on the phone with you. Anyway, get down to the scene. The boys had come onto the highway, possibly a bit fast, but there was a divot in the road that they had hit, and the police definitely didn't press any charges. A bit of inexperienced driving, I would say. It could have just as easily been my son as his friend.
Mm.
Um, but they came onto the highway, they went through the highway fence, they hit a big light pole, they flipped back onto the highway and then rolled a few times and then slid upside down up the highway. And they had sent 6 police cars, they had sent 2 ambulances and a fire truck, and they were expecting to cut these kids out of the car. Um, their recollection of the story is pretty wild, but they ended up sort of just sitting there quiet with this car upside down. And Mitch said to Matt, Are you still there? And Matt said, Yeah, I'm here. And apparently that was just this moment for them of absolute relief that they were both okay. Um, but yeah, Doc followed the ambulance, and Matt had got a phone by this time. The phone had been flung into the boot of the car, so Matt didn't have a phone for a while. And they were on the way to the hospital, and the cheeky little fella, he was probably 19 then, sent me some photos from the hospital with him in his purple hospital gown with his thumbs up as if to say, Mum, I survived. But the car was a complete mess. And the next day, they kept him in hospital for quite a long time, waiting for their heart rate to come down. They scanned so many parts of their body. They had no broken bones. They were totally fine. So they probably got home 2 or 3 in the morning, and my husband waited up the hospital with Matt's friends dad, and like only men can do, Jodi, they sat in the waiting room because they couldn't see them for quite a while, but they sat in the waiting room telling all their childhood stories and their teenage stories about how they almost died numerous times. Um, but I remember the next day we went to see the car, and all of the boys were coming down with all of their families, and it was quite an emotional kind of time, and they were all sort of bonding and cleaning up the car and pulling it apart and trying to find their stuff in this car.
Mm.
But Matt said to me, I want to go down to my mates again tonight. And he just said to me, I'll just take the car and go down. Now, we had taken him earlier that day, but it was my assumption, Jodi, that he wouldn't get into the car for weeks.
Mhm.
Like, I was not ready for him to get into the car again the next day. Like, it was just too much for me. And I remember just crying and just saying, Matt, just are you not like traumatized? Do you not need to like slow down here? Like, I don't want you to get scared in the car or freeze up, or do you want to just take this a bit slow? And I remember him grabbing me and just hugging me and saying to me, Mum, he said, I have to do this for me. And the longer I wait, the harder it's going to get. And then he throws in this line, which I think is beyond hilarious in all of his 20-year-old wisdom. He says to me, he says, excuse me, he said to me, Mum, the likelihood of that ever happening again statistically is so low. So I was like, drive like a nana, ring me when you get there. And I really had to get used to him getting in the car again. I would get very nervous, when I knew he was due home at 9 o'clock and it was 9:30. I really didn't like him driving with somebody else.
Mm.
I would prefer him to be driving. And that was sort of a big one for me. And I would lecture the boys, drive like a nana. You have to ring me when you get there.
Yes.
And look, they probably put up with it for about a month, but then, they were like, Mum, come on, time to move on. But it's a lot harder for us sometimes because they want us to be in the moment with where they're at when they're young.
Mm.
And sometimes they have just gone through something really big, and it's harder for us because I think our memory bank really gives us the gravity of situations where, they're still developing that memory bank.
They are, and it's so interesting because it completely flips the situation on its head, doesn't it? When you haven't got a anxious child needing reassurance from a parent, which is the most common thing that I talk about and see and hear and discuss and teach about. This is completely the other way around, and for very, very good reason. I mean, I can't imagine how you felt the future thinking and the sense of dread and the stomach, the pit in your stomach and all the
Mm,
anxiety about what on earth is gonna happen, and yet he was so right, wasn't he? What a rational, wise young man, and I'm not surprised given he's your son, but to be able to sort of say on the face of it, "Look, that's really not something we have to ever worry about happening again. It's so highly unlikely," but doesn't mean that the brain won't go there when it's your flesh and bone, it's your kid you're worried about.
It does, and he did such an amazing job of validating and also bringing a little bit of facts into the equation when he needed to. It was about a month later, there was a accident very close to our house. I was getting ready to go out to a speaking night, and I heard this massive crash, and the sensation in my body was just awful. And one of my sons, my eldest, was actually due home, and I couldn't help my mind just go there and sort of think, surely it can't be him. And I was anxious enough to actually ring my eldest,
Mm.
and I couldn't get through to him. And so when I started to leave to go out, I drove past the scene and there was tape up and someone had died there, and there was people. Oh, it was awful. There was people everywhere. And as I drove past, Jody, I caught a glimpse of the car, and it was a grey car. Now my son, who was not home yet, drove a grey car. And I drove, listen, this is how anxiety works, doesn't it? I drove up to the policeman, I wound down the window, and I said, "I think that might be my son." And my the policeman said to me, "What kind of car does he drive?" Now, look, I am I don't know, as naive about cars as you could be. And so I said to him, "A grey car." And he said, "Ma'am, just go and park by the side and then come straight to me." And so I'm panicking now, and I
Mm.
ring my husband and I say, "Darling, there's been an accident down here, and it's a grey car. It might be Ben." And my husband said to me, "Oh, you're funny. Do you know what else? What else? What kind of car it is?" I said, "No, but it's a grey one." And he said, he said, "Read me the number plate." So, like a mad lady, I get out of the car. I didn't even see the tape. Like, I walked right underneath that tape. I'm pushing past people to catch a sight of the number plate. And as I read out the number plate, my husband just kept saying to me, "It's not Ben's car, Michelle. It's not Ben's car." But it's funny what triggers you from that point, isn't it? And I think as parents, we are very aware of those things that tend to be kind of bruises on us,
Yeah.
little trigger points where we can start to, push past the crowd and get underneath the tape. And soon the police officer was straight next to me saying, "Ma'am, I don't think it's your son." And I'm like, "No, it's not my son. It's not his number plate." And he was, it was very lovely to me.
Oh.
But I think as we go through parenting, Jody, it's real. I think that's what we need to
Mm.
say, isn't it? This stuff can be very, very real, especially when it comes to our kids' safety.
Oh, it is, and it's hard to let go, but we know that the best thing for our kids is that independence and that freedom and an opportunity to sort of nudge at their own comfort zone. And I know a lot of families with younger kids, and it's so fascinating for me because our kids are 11 and 13, soon to be 12 and
Mhm,
14. And
mhm,
and I have friends who have kids that are similar ages to Maddie and Ben. And it's the different challenges coming up through different stages of motherhood and of parenting. And I let our daughter was allowed to sort of go on big walks and bike rides with her friends in lockdown here in
mhm.
Melbourne because it was one of the only ways that they could actually catch up. And she didn't have a phone. She didn't have any way of communicating. Usually one of the girls would have a phone, but I knew that perhaps it was a little bit sooner than perhaps I might have normally said yes to that, but I knew how important it was for her mental health, her well-being, and her staying afloat in such a difficult time. Um, and in the same time, our son had a very, very serious biking accident, and we were hospitalised. He was hospitalised for a number of days, and that was and it's just like, well, yes, and we just said, right, well, when he got the all clear to get back on the bike, I just knew that was just something that was going to happen, and it was important to happen. But geez, you want to wrap
It's
him up.
hard.
You want to wrap
And
him
I
up.
I think they're ready before we are sometimes, isn't it? And especially around those decisions about firsts. I feel like a lot of parents have this with their first sleepovers and, their first trip to the shopping centre on their own with their friends. And, you know, they are really hard decisions to make sometimes, and sometimes we wonder if it's us that's not ready for it or they're not quite ready for it, and it's really hard to distinguish between the 2.
Oh, it really is. You've taken me back to, we were in Bright for a family holiday in January, and we went to this amazing swimming hole, and it's a swimming hole where there are lots of different places that you can jump in the water, lots of different places. So you can jump in from, the river was so much higher because of all of the rain. You could jump in from sort of 4 or 5 feet, 6 or 7 feet. You could swing out on the rope and let go, or you could do the what looked like a 12 to 15-foot jump. And as a family, we all love doing that sort of thing, and we've taught our kids to do that in progressions, in increments. But whilst we were there and we'd all done all of it, had a lot of fun, there were some young men that arrived, some probably 20-somethings, and they were doing backflips off this very, very high jump. And it was a careful jump. You had to jump out far enough to avoid the rocks, and we've been there many, many years running. We know what to look for and what to do. And of course, everyone else just arrives and sees other people doing it and just follows suit. But backflips, somersaults, you name it.
Mm,
And I was just watching them thinking, I couldn't watch. I actually found it really hard to watch. And in my
yeah.
head, I was thinking, geez, I hope when our son is older and he's there at this same place with his mates, that
Mm,
he makes sensible choices. And I think he will.
mm,
But you
mm,
can't, I mean, it's keep them alive till they're 25, isn't it?
yeah, that's right.
With the brain development. Um,
Yeah. And they do these things that take you right out on the edge of your comfort zone as parents. I think that's the really hard part of watching, isn't it? It's like they're dragging you right to the edge of where you're comfortable. I love what you said there, Jodie, about starting small and those incremental steps, because I feel like as much as our kids need that, we need that as well. You know, it's boundaries and it's education and it's letting go in incremental steps, and it's almost proving to us and to them that it's a strong enough place to sit in. I think that's really important, because otherwise you can't sort of assess the risk of something that's too far ahead of you, can you?
Yes, yes, you're right. If you Yeah, that's exactly right. So you've got to build up to it, and we can do that when they're with us, when they're under our wing, so to speak, can't we? We can I mean, it's interesting. There are probably families that might go to this particular place and opt not to, because of the unknown and because of the unpredictable nature of water that has a current, and but maybe that in this year, maybe next year they might try. And but the way I look at it is, I think, well, with responsibility and sensibility and care, but also teaching risk. We want our kids to be able to move out of their comfort zones and essentially be risk takers. It's one of the fundamentals of our kids' primary school, is being a risk taker and being a community citizen. It's an IB school, but within reason, and like you say, not going so far ahead where it's just too hard to predict what's going to happen. But like anything, it's that stepladder approach, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I
Mm,
think that's really, and also catching ourselves when we are not, when we're just parenting out of fear and we're not leaning into this kind of posture of trust. I think that's what I've learned more than anything through that experience is my physical reaction to things actually tells me a lot about where I'm at. There's this sort of feeling that I've got when I'm coming out of a place of trust, even when my instincts are telling me my kids need to slow down on something. It's like my body's still grounded. And I'm leaning into it in a compassionate way. But sometimes when I'm not in that posture of trust, and I'll call it more of a posture of fear, and I'm sure there's a continuum, and I'm also sure we can flip between those two things pretty quickly. But that kind of posture of fear is normally when I do my worst parenting. It's normally when I make sort of some really uncalculated decisions and I go too far one way or too far the other way.
mm. Yeah, I think, in the moment, it's hard to step back and make that observation, isn't it? Because when we are in that moment and feeling overcome by the fear, we react quite instinctively. It's protect, keep safe, not necessarily in that moment. It's about us. It's about our kids. It's only sometimes in hindsight, isn't it? We can look back and go, Yeah.
Oh, just there, you just dropped some gold just there. We just need to stop and think about that. I think when it does become about us and not about what's best for our kids, not what's helpful for them, we know we're flipping into parenting out of fear, don't we?
Yes.
And when it becomes about our story and our concerns, and we're not able to see out of their window and what they're seeing and wanting to experience in life, it's a fine line. I've found that sometimes it's really important to process my emotions away from my kids because it
Mm.
allows me to come back into parenting in a much fresher space. And whether that means getting on the phone to, my own mum or a friend, or even going to a psychologist where you can really unpack something that's triggering you
Mm.
in parenting, that can be really, really helpful just to allow us just a place to process so our process doesn't get caught up in our parenting.
Oh, I love that it's the idea that when we can recognize where our nervous system is at, and I teach about polyvagal theory when I'm speaking, and I talk
Mhm.
about it's essentially a traffic light system. There's sort of the green at the bottom. We want to be in the green zone. We want our nervous system to be in the green zone. And I did an episode about dropping anchor, which helps to really settle our system, ground us, and bring us back into the present. If your arousal is high, you're in the yellow zone, which is and I'll put a link to this image in the show notes as well. It's fight or flight, and we can dip in and out of fight or flight during the day.
Mhm.
It's when we get stuck, but it often can take a little bit of time for us to recognise that we are stuck.
Yeah.
And what you were saying before really reminded me of, because I have an anxiety disorder and we have really great communication here in the home. The kids are really aware of my mental health and my anxiety, and it's just taken me back to a situation that we discussed. It's actually at that same swimming hole, would you believe, years ago when we first discovered it, and the water was much lower. There was almost like a natural little slide in a little sort of groove where a slender young body could sort of sit in and slide down this sort of small waterfall, and there was a little dip where you'd sort of pop under the water and then pop back up again. But
Mhm.
the kids galore were doing it. Kids galore were doing it, and the anxiety that it provoked in me, I was having
Yeah.
catastrophic thoughts of getting stuck. I
Mhm.
couldn't see under the water. I couldn't put myself in a place where I could observe that
Yeah.
100 children had done this exact thing, and that was fun. They're having the time of their lives, and everyone was pretty relaxed about it. And I was just starting to get this panic welling up. And
Yeah.
Peter was able to recognise that with me, and he was able to. And because I was getting shitty, I was getting snappy, and I was not.
Mhm.
I'm probably uh, really most of the time very calm and peaceful parent. And in fact, we need to be able to share all of our emotions. But at the time, I was sort of just talking to our son, going, "No, you can't do it," and carrying on, and,
Yeah.
and not being terribly rational at the time.
Rational.
Peter was able
But
to sort of,
isn't it beautiful that you can be so honest? Because I think it doesn't do our kids any favors by just putting up a stiff upper lip and trying to be perfect in front of them all the time. They're incredibly attuned to us. And I think as long as we're holding our space as a parent and being responsible
mm,
for moving ourselves in the right direction and modeling that, I think it's really important that we're able to be honest. And there's a beautiful relationship that happens between kids and their parents when there is that honesty there. I think it's really beautiful.
I agree with you, and I know that the relationship and the communication that you have with Ben and Matt has enabled the conversations to evolve after there's I guess there's a before and then there's an after with regards to
Yeah.
that accident, and that
Mhm.
he was able to plus that connection. He knew you well enough
Mm.
to see where you were coming from, and the sense of mind to be able to provide some validation and some reassurance, without saying mum, just without sort of blowing you off and just saying, well, don't worry about it,
Yeah.
don't be
No, he
ridiculous.
didn't. Yeah.
um,
And he gave me this long hug before he would always go and tell me that he loved me.
mm,
And occasionally he'd really cheekily put in, "Is this the last thing I ever say to you, mum? I
oh
want
my
you to."
god.
But he did. But he was handling me, like he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna be this person in your life right now that is just gonna be reassuring to you." And I don't think it hurts him to step up to that.
Mm.
That moment you're describing with the water hole, that's exactly the state I got myself in with the grey car. And you're in that space, don't you?
Yes.
And it's a very contagious type of energy, and you're trying to convince everyone that what you're feeling is real, and you want everyone to buy into it just as strongly as you're buying into it in that moment. And it's great to have people in your life that will just sort of sit with you in that.
Yes, and help you to settle your own system and people that you can trust as well. That in that Peter, because I trust Peter implicitly, and I know he wouldn't make a decision that was irresponsible as a parent. And so when he said, "Look, it's absolutely fine," because you don't want your own anxiety, like we've said earlier, you don't want your own anxiety to stand in the way of your kids doing the
No.
things that are fun for them and that give them that sense of independence and freedom and joy and thrill and
Yeah.
but I know in
And they
yeah.
need to take risks. And when you watch children climb trees,
Hmm.
I've forgotten who uses this example often. It might be Maggie Dent, but she just talks about, young ones climbing trees, and they climb right out to their limits. But every child is different, and every child will stop at a different height depending on how they feel they can handle that tree, and how strong they feel in that moment, and where their feeling of strength is in that moment. And if
Mm.
we override that all the time, we're sort of telling them where that line is. I think we're sort of like restricting them. We have to let them find that limit. And occasionally they're probably going to get a broken bone, and we assess the risk as we go. But if the risk is low to medium, kind of should let them go for it and find their own capacity.
Yes. Yes, and it's oh god, it's hard, isn't it, sometimes?
It is.
It's and the driving thing, I mean, I know, when I had my license and I was a designated driver. This is what I was 18. I'd not long had my license. Had my own car, designated driver. I'd been to a 21st, taken, one friend and was picking up another between the 21st and going to the pub, and I hadn't had a drink, and I made an assumption, inexperience caught up with me. I made an assumption and turned it was night. I wasn't that familiar with night driving. I misjudged the speed of a vehicle that also had an indicator on that hadn't clicked off. Made the
Mm,
assumption that this vehicle was far enough away and was turning, so would be slowing, turned in front of it, and, the absolute hysteria that experience sent me
mm,
running into one of the houses of totally random family and just opening the front door and just screaming, "I've got to ring my mum, I've got to ring my mum," and, I never I know what I put my parents through hell that night, and look, nobody was hurt, thank goodness, and everyone was just so worried about were we okay? We were all a bit shaken up. Well, there's 2 of us were a bit shaken up, and, but on the other side of it now, I just can't imagine what that phone call must have been like, and for my parents to see me back behind the wheel, my car was a write-off, um,
mm.
and for me to develop that confidence as well to be able to get behind the wheel. I don't remember that being a big issue like Matt. I remember getting
Yeah,
behind the wheel pretty quickly,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
but, with different stages of, kids and their ages, and your boys, may or may not be in your nest for too much longer as well. That's the
That's
next bit,
right.
isn't it?
It's the next stage. It's what I call nervous bystander energy. When you're watching your child play, let's just pick a sport like soccer, and there's, a goal that they're trying to kick, and there's this pit in your stomach just before they go for it, and you don't know whether they're gonna get it or not, and maybe the team's relying on it, and you're rooting for them, but you've got this nervous bystander energy. And it's that nervous bystander energy that I think we can learn to channel into more productive places and helpful places once we recognize what it is. And, like just even things like during exam time, they don't need extra on top of what they're doing. We want to channel that into helpful places. So, you know, it being able to ask kids, "What do you need me to do to support you right now?" And letting them give you some cues as to where to channel that energy is pretty important, because I think it's unrealistic that we go through parenting without a bit of that nervous energy.
Mm.
It's just a real part of parenting that we need to learn to recognize, harness, and use for our kids' advantage, not disadvantage.
Mm. I think you're spot on with that, and that open line of communication to be able to say that I'm there are times when, like you say, we need to walk away, process our emotions on our own, in our own way. There are other times when we might be in a position to say, "God, I'm feeling like this, and this is more about me than you," which I
Mhm.
occasionally say. And sometimes I can just sort of say, "Look, I know that this is my anxiety talking. I know that it's," and if the stakes, because I'm about feel anxious and do it anyway, and that's all very well and good for me as a parent. I try to settle my system and bring myself back down to a place where I can see what's the rational and best way of moving forward here. But like anyone, I get caught up sometimes, and every now and again, I can just say, "Look, that's my anxiety talking. You go ahead." Um, and just sort of talk it through. And both of our kids can say, "Okay, they get it. They understand." And there's this really beautiful maturity around it in our home as well. It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen and it can get in the way a little bit, I can talk them through what I'm
It's
experiencing.
great, Jody.
There's that understanding. Yeah.
I think that allows them to be useful as well, rather than just being on the sidelines and possibly feeling anxious because their mum's feeling anxious.
Mm,
Because I think the deepest desire for a lot of kids is that their parents are okay and that their parents are happy. Um, they love us just as much as we love them. And sometimes we think it's all about us. We love them so much, but they actually want to love us too. And I
mm.
think it's just the way you describe that, just you're empowering them to love you and to support you and be helpful in those moments. I think it's beautiful.
It is. It works really well for us, and I'm really conscious too that they're because they understand so well. I'm also really conscious too, and like I have a great relationship with my mum, and that when things are not good for me, I turn to Pete, I turn to mum, I turn to my friends, I turn in that direction because kids, when they're empathetic, can see that you're not good, but and want to help, and it's not
Mhm.
necessarily their role. There's a
No,
time and a
it's not their
place.
burden. That's right.
Yeah, there's a time and a place. Like if you trip over and you hurt your knee, and your child needs to come to your rescue. Well, then that if they're the only one there, then that depends on their age as well. But we need to. It's just such a tricky thing, and it's so fluid, isn't it? Managing ourselves and knowing what's the appropriate amount of insight for our kids to have into where we're at, so that they don't feel responsible if we're not in a good place as well.
Absolutely. If we think of the family like a system, in some ways there has to be an awareness of how the system works. And I think your example before was just a beautiful kind of explanation of how we work as a system during certain moments. But the idea of processing kind of our emotions away from our kids so we can come with that plan and we can come with this is the education, this is the way forward during those moments. I think there's a line there that's really important, because unfortunately, because anxiety is so contagious and our kids do want to be so helpful, they can come to our rescue in a way that is not helpful for them, and they
Mm.
can be trying to carry us during times where it's not their backpack to carry and it's not their burden to carry. And that has to be something that we're really get good at modeling, because when they go forward in their relationships, we want to make sure that they know how to carry their own backpack in life and don't start picking up everybody else's baggage and carry, because relationships can never be healthy when they're like that.
Oh, I love that you've said that. It is. It's such a I've never thought about it like that. Instinctively, I know when to share and disclose and when not to. And
Mm.
I'm very, very, very lucky to have a really great support network. And I invite our listeners today to sort of think about, well, who is in your support network? Who do you turn to? Because we do. we do need people to share their calm with us when we become overwhelmed or we become anxious or we become distressed or we're experiencing some challenges. And and there are times when beautifully our kids will do that, but it doesn't work well when that's the go-to.
That's right. And our kids always need to know that whatever challenge we're facing, it's not the challenge we're hiding from them, or trying to sort of protect them from. I think the overarching message, though, is that they see you overcome and they see you face your challenges and take responsibility for them. And
Mm.
I feel like when they see us holding our own baggage in life and actually really owning that and taking responsibility for that, then their little gestures of help, just they just add to us carrying our main load, but they're definitely not coming in and carrying that load for us.
Yes. Oh, it's such a beautiful metaphor. And it takes me back to a great lesson from Dr. Chris McCurry, who was an earlier guest. And he talked about, in fact, I don't know if he talked about this on my podcast or if this was in another conversation I had with him. And he talked about coping out loud. And
Mm,
in times when, so for example, today, as you know, I had a cut and colour,
yeah.
and I also had my
It looks
boost.
beautiful, by the way, everyone.
Thank you, gorgeous. Um, I I had a cut and colour, um, and I was sitting at the hairdresser, falling asleep just about because I had my booster yesterday, and my body feels a bit achy, and I just came home and just felt. I actually have one home with me today, who's not so day 2 of school and not feeling too good, which is not ideal. And I just said to her, "Look, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling really fatigued, and I know what it's from. And so to really help reset my body and my mind, I'm going to go and take a nap." And that's the idea of
That's right.
coping out
Mhm,
loud. Is there's no burden on her.
mhm,
She understands that it's just a mild situation, but I'm sharing with
mhm.
her, this is what I'm going to do to this is in my coping toolkit. And the more, and within reason, of course, within reason with our kids, we can cope out loud in a way that, if somebody cancels on us and we're frustrated, or we can say, "Oh my gosh, I feel so frustrated. I'd planned this so long ago, and I'm not quite sure where to go next from here, but I'm just going to gather my thoughts, and these things happen, and I'm going to go down and do some research and look at how I'm going to sort of reschedule and just move forward. And I'm going to focus on what I can control and let go of what I can't." And
I love that.
yeah,
A and there's a beautiful statement too that I like to use. It says, "So I will." So, like, "Look, I've had a really bad day," or, "I'm feeling particularly worried about you going out tonight, Matt, so I will." And I
mm,
think it's just helping them see that we're taking action and we are working within that circle of control and focusing on taking responsibility. And it's those little coping out loud, "So I will." It's those little things that sometimes kids pick up on, and you can see them starting to model it as well. And I just love that. They're just adorable when you see it kind of mirrored back at
oh,
you.
it's just the best, isn't it? It's just the
It's the
best.
best.
I just love it. Particularly exercise is such a huge part of our life here. And I did a whole episode on exercise, as you know. And mm,
Exceptional, Jodie.
oh,
Exceptional episode.
thank you. It's just such an extraordinary prescription, I say in air quotes, for our mood, our mental health, our life in so many ways. And so for a long time, I'll sort of model, if I'm feeling a bit edgy, I'll say, "Oh, I think I need to go for a run. I'm feeling just a bit wound up." Or I'll say, "Oh, I've just done a basketball game. Oh, I feel amazing." Even though I do it late at night, can't sleep for 3 hours, 4 hours afterwards because I'm on such a high. And now, like, our son went for a run yesterday because he didn't start school to today, and he comes home. He goes, "I feel amazing," and I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" So he's 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 experiencing it now. It's not just he's making that connection between how good you can feel and the activity that he's just done, which is just so good for his mental health and his physical health as it is for anyone's. And it was just one of those little moments where I've just gone like a little fist pump, little
I
fist pump
love it.
moment.
So many parents during COVID messaged me and they just said to me, I feel like I'm, failing my kids because they're seeing me struggling. And,
Mm,
that they really felt the burden of that. And, the more I guess I've talked to parents around even just them feeling like they are damaging their children by
mm,
having moments where they're struggling, the more I've realized it's so important that parents really realize that even they don't have to feel ashamed of their struggles. It's the how you're managing them that's the most important. And some of the things that we might think are, mistakes, they're not deal breakers for our kids. I think the bottom line is how we're managing things.
mm.
And when you see like your son coming back and just having that, mirroring that back to you in those moments, you start to think to yourself, there's some great benefits in really being real with kids.
Yes, there really is. And gosh, they pick up on so much that we may not be they just pick up on a lot,
Agreed.
don't they? I
Agreed.
think
Yeah.
when I was a teacher, I wasn't a parent, and I was I was a very responsible teacher, and I loved the kids I taught. But once, but I think I probably underestimated them, and because I just didn't know. And then when you become a parent and you see kids develop and grow and mature through the ages, and you realize just at what ages just how sensitive they can be to their environment, how attuned that they can be to other people, how
Very wise.
wise, yes,
Mm.
yes. And so and again, and I think one of the things we've really emphasized in our conversation today is that we need to bring them along the journey to a point, so that they can have an understanding of what's happening in a house, because kids, when something's wrong in a household, if someone's not coping very well, or something's going a bit south, kids will pick up on that. And it's up to us to decide, well, how much do they need to know about it? But like you say, also for them to know that it's under control. So that's nothing that they don't have to parent us. They don't have to
Mhm.
parent us. And that's
That's right.
mm,
Maybe in summary, we can say carry our own baggage or process our emotions away from our kids as much as we can. Model carrying that bag really well and make sure you're lightening the load for them coming up. But every now and again, they're going to see what's in that bag, and that's okay. That's
mm,
that's reality.
it is, and it helps them know that uh, if and when a little bit of what's
Mhm.
in our bag ends up in theirs through their
Mm,
own life
it's reality.
experience,
Mhm.
that's something that they can turn to us for support with, and that they've seen us manage through and find our way through. Yeah, coping and those types of skills, but also that overarching metaphor is it's just an absolutely beautiful place for us to finish, I think. And but that said, if we had another hour, I think we'd use it very wisely.
I think you and I could chat all day, Jodie. I think we've done well.
Oh, I remember that lovely conversation we had when I think I was in the car. I think you might have been as well. And ever since then, I've been so looking forward to talking with you. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your not only your expertise and your wisdom, because you've just got so much experience working with kids in uh, all sorts of challenging situations, and you've brought such a warmth and such a wisdom to us today, and but also sharing your personal story. I really appreciate that, and I am glad that things worked out the way they did, and such a pivotal moment in time that, although it was a very, very difficult time, you all came through in a way that, was just gosh,
Together, and I'm so
together.
grateful. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Your connection with your boys, your communication as a family.
Stronger. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. So yeah, thank you so much, lovely. Thank you so much. And now, if people, where can people find you? I'll put the links in the show notes. But
Oh,
where?
I'm easy to find, michellemitchell.org. And, it's easy to get to my socials from there. And, I've got a free blog there and some resources there. So really easy place to find me. But thank you for having me, Jodi. This podcast is amazing.
Oh,
It's actually been a really big help to me as well. So it's a precious gift to the world, this one.
oh, you're lovely. Thank you for saying so, Michelle. It really means a lot. I really appreciate, and thank you for sharing your gifts with us too, because people will learn so much from our conversation today. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's just been such a pleasure having you with us again. And I hope you felt like a little bit of a fly on the wall with a conversation between two mums and two women who care deeply about our families and other people's mental health and well-being. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Please share it. And I very much look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.